They never asked you to beg. But you did, in silence, in small, pitiful ways you didn't even recognize as begging. Waiting for a text that never came. Reading old messages like scripture. Interpreting their coldness as a test you still had a chance to pass. Convincing yourself that one more act of patience, one more display of understanding, one more sacrifice would finally earn you their tenderness. That wasn't love. That was you crawling. And the most brutal part? They knew. They watched you fold yourself down to size again and again, and they never stopped you. They fed on it. This isn't drama. This is reality for too many people caught in relationships with narcissists, where dignity is slowly traded for crumbs of approval, and self-worth is whittled into silence. You thought you were being loyal, strong, devoted. But what you were really doing was erasing yourself for the sake of someone who never planned to see you clearly to begin with. And that's the question this video dares to ask you. Are you crawling for a narcissist's mercy without even knowing it? Because if you are, it won't look like what you think. It won't look like begging on your knees. It'll look like over-explaining, like tolerating disrespect just one more time, like staying in a situation that makes you sick, but calling it just complicated. It'll look like emotional starvation dressed up as deep connection. It'll look like hoping, quietly, desperately, that this time your silence will be rewarded with kindness. But it never is. Because the game is rigged. You were cast in the role of servant the moment you showed them your empathy, and they've kept you there by feeding you just enough attention to keep your hope on life support. Enough. This isn't love. This isn't resilience. This is self-abandonment under a mask of emotional loyalty. And the first step out? It's not confrontation, it's recognition. So if this message feels like it's cutting too close, if you feel seen in ways that make your stomach turn, like this video, share it with someone who needs to be shaken awake, and subscribe to Victory Stoic. This is not where we stay asleep. This is where we wake up, clean up, and rise up. And in the comments, drop either your personal story or our shared commandment, respect, now. Because you never needed to beg. You only needed to remember that begging doesn't work on people who enjoy watching you kneel. And once you realize that, once you stand up, not with fury but with finality, there's no going back. What comes next won't be easy, but it will be yours. And no one gets to take that from you again. Number 1, every time you explain yourself, you renew their control. You think you're being mature, calm, logical. You think that if you just explain your feelings clearly enough, they'll understand. That if you give them the full picture, they'll finally see you, respect you, meet you where you are. But here's what's really happening. You're crawling, and they know it. A narcissist doesn't hear your explanation and think, oh, now I understand their perspective. They hear your explanation and think, gotcha. You're still trying to earn me. To them, your words are not communication. They are compliance. Every time you open your mouth to explain how they hurt you, why something mattered, why you deserve better treatment, you're doing something you don't realize. You're playing defense in a game they designed, with rules that change every time you're about to win. Let's name the game for what it is: emotional authority. Narcissists don't just want attention or admiration. They want power over how you see yourself. They want to frame the narrative. Your feelings? Inconvenient. Your boundaries, attacks, your needs, drama, and your desire to reason with them. An opportunity to re-establish control. Because if you're explaining, you're still submitting to the idea that they have the right to judge your experience. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth about you." But when you're caught in the orbit of a narcissist, their opinion becomes gospel. And you find yourself trying to earn credibility in a courtroom where the judge doesn't believe in evidence, only obedience. Let's be painfully specific. Imagine this. You say, "When you ignored my text for 2 days, it made me feel disrespected." What you mean is, "I want mutual care." What they hear is, "I still care enough to explain myself." They don't apologize. They flip it. "You're too sensitive. You always make everything about you." "I was busy." Now you're backpedaling, clarifying, trying to stay calm, but the damage is done. You've taught them that your pain is up for debate. This is not communication. This is emotional warfare disguised as conversation. Take Brian, 41, a contractor from Houston. His ex never yelled, never cursed, never hit, but every conflict turned into a slow-motion mental beatdown. Whenever Brian brought up how she hurt him, she'd go eerily quiet, nod, and then say something like, "I guess I just can't do anything right for you." Suddenly, he was the villain. He found himself apologizing for bringing it up in the first place. And the more he explained, the more she controlled the narrative. He wasn't clarifying, he was crawling. Psychologically, this is known as reactive abuse. The narcissist creates confusion and provocation, waits for your emotional response, and then uses your own reaction against you. And the more calmly you try to explain, the more ammunition you hand over. But it's not just about the narcissist, it's about you. Ask yourself, why do I keep explaining? Because you want to be understood? Or because you're afraid that if you're not understood, you'll be abandoned? That if you don't make it make sense, they'll withdraw the crumbs of approval you've come to depend on? That's not love. That's survival. That's crawling on a battlefield with no finish line. So how do you stop? Step 1. Accept that understanding is not the goal, not for them. The more you try to explain, the more they manipulate the context. Narcissists don't want clarity, they want leverage. Step 2. Disengage from the debate. When they twist your words, stay still. When they bait you into calmly explaining, resist. Say what you mean once and exit the arena. That doesn't work for me. I've said what I need to say. Then stop. Let the silence work harder than your words ever could. Step 3. Reclaim emotional sovereignty. Your truth doesn't need their approval to be valid. The minute you stop requiring their understanding is the minute you become untouchable. Here's your metaphor. You're in a courtroom, but the judge is also the prosecutor. The evidence changes daily. The rules shift mid-trial, and every time you speak, the record gets edited to make you look guilty. The only winning move? Walk out of the courtroom, never return. The Stoics believed in clarity without attachment. Epictetus wrote, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." So stop letting them provoke your need to prove something. Prove nothing. Protect everything. You don't need to explain your humanity to someone who profits from denying it. You don't need to argue for your right to be treated with care. You don't need one more exhausting circular conversation to finally be heard. You just need one decision. You will not crawl for clarity. You will walk away with it. Number 2, the pain isn't from them. It's from your hope that they'll change. They didn't break you. You broke yourself trying to believe they'd one day become the person they pretended to be at the start. The pain you're drowning in isn't rooted in their cruelty. It's rooted in your hope. The desperate, clinging belief that if you love hard enough, endure long enough, explain clearly enough, they'll see it, feel it, and finally transform. That maybe the version of them you saw for 3 perfect weeks in the beginning wasn't just an act. That maybe it's hidden somewhere under the silence, the gaslighting, the blame. You hold on, not to who they are, but to the story you told yourself. But here's the truth. They won't change. Not because they can't, because they don't want to. You're not bleeding from their behavior. You're bleeding from the fantasy you built around it. The Stoic philosopher Hierocles wrote, "Grief arises more from the opinions we hold than from the things themselves." Your suffering isn't coming from who they are. It's coming from the belief that they should be someone else by now. That after everything you've done, everything you've given, surely they owe you growth. But narcissists don't grow. They adapt, not to love you better, but to manipulate you more efficiently. Psychologically, this dynamic is called trauma bonding. According to Dr. Patrick Carnes, this is a condition where a cycle of abuse and intermittent reward creates a powerful emotional attachment to the abuser. Your brain gets hooked on the tiny moments of relief, a rare compliment, a surprise apology, a calm day. You think, this must mean we're making progress, but it's not progress. It's the reset button on the next round of control. Let's talk about someone stuck in this cycle. Rebecca, 36, a nurse in St. Louis, dated someone who was emotionally unavailable, subtly critical, and always made her feel like she was asking too much. Every few weeks, he'd say something like, "I know I've been distant. I'm working on it." And she'd soften. She clung to those words like they were water in a desert. But months passed. Nothing changed. Every time she thought about leaving, she'd remember one good weekend 6 months ago and tell herself, that version of him is still in there. I just have to hang on. She wasn't in love. She was in emotional debt, paying off the illusion of who he never really was. The pain didn't come from the way he ignored her, belittled her, or guilt-tripped her. It came from her refusal to accept that this was who he was. The difference between reality and the story she told herself, that's where the suffering lived. Here's the truth no one wants to admit. Narcissists are often consistent. It's you who's inconsistent with your expectations. You keep hoping for evolution in a person who has already shown you their final form. Every maybe he didn't mean it is a subtle betrayal of your own clarity. So what do? Step 1. Separate the facts from the fantasy. Take out a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. On one side, write what they've actually done, actions, not intentions. On the other side, write what you wish they'd become. Now look at it. Be brutal. The wider the gap, the deeper your pain. Step 2. Stop managing their growth. They're not a project. They're not your test. You're not a bad person for wanting them to change, but you will become a shell of yourself if you keep waiting for it. Step 3. Create a consequence for inaction. If you've asked for change more than twice and nothing shifted, stop asking. Withdraw your energy. Say less. Do less. Step back without fanfare. Your absence will do more than your pleading ever could. Here's a metaphor to hold on to. Imagine standing in a burning house, convinced that if you rearrange the furniture, it'll somehow stop the flames. It won't. The structure is toxic. You don't rebuild inside it, you leave. One final thought from Epictetus. Don't hope that events will turn out the way you want, but welcome events in whatever way they happen. This doesn't mean accept abuse. It means accept what is real, so you can finally act from a place of strength, not fantasy. Because you weren't destroyed by their behavior. You were destroyed by your hope that they'd stop. But now you know. And now you stop. Number 3. You think you're being kind, but you're addicted to the abuse relief cycle. You call it compassion, patience, emotional maturity. But what you're really stuck in is a cycle. One so toxic, so seductive, it should come with a warning label. Because this isn't kindness anymore. It's addiction. Not to the person, to the pattern. They praise you, then they pull away, then they criticize, then they apologize. And every time they circle back to, I didn't mean to, you know I love you, let's start over. Your nervous system doesn't process it as love, it processes it as relief. And that relief feels like a reward. Welcome to one of the most dangerous dynamics in narcissistic abuse, intermittent reinforcement. It's a behavioral psychology principle that says inconsistent rewards create stronger conditioning than regular ones. Slot machines use it, so do narcissists. They don't love you steadily, they love you strategically. Just enough to keep you hoping, just long enough to keep you hooked. You're not staying because it's always good. You're staying because it's occasionally good. And in your mind, that sometimes becomes proof that it's worth enduring the bad. But you're not being noble, you're being trained. Every insult followed by affection rewires your brain. Every abandonment followed by an I miss you triggers a dopamine release. Every stonewalling session followed by sudden warmth tells your body, if I just wait long enough, the love will come back. It's not love, it's emotional heroin. And your dealer is the person who breaks you just to be the one who puts you back together. Let's make this real. Erica, 29, a chef in Portland, was in a relationship with a man who'd go silent for days, then show up at her door with flowers and apologies. He'd tell her she was his world. The next week, he'd criticize her weight, flirt with others in front of her, mock her dreams. When she'd get upset, he'd say she was too intense, too emotional, too dramatic. But every time she tried to leave, he'd collapse into softness. I'm lost without you. I'm a mess, but I'm trying. She told herself, he just needs time. What she didn't realize was, he had already mastered the formula. Hurt, withdraw, reward, repeat. And every time she forgave, she wasn't proving her love. She was proving her dependence. The Stoics would have called this out immediately. Seneca once wrote, he who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're suffering by choice, because the pain has become familiar, predictable, almost comforting. So how do you break it? Step 1, recognize the cycle. Write it down, literally. When did they praise you? When did they disappear? What triggered the rage? What came after? Patterns don't lie, only people do. Step 2. Reframe the good moments. Stop calling them proof of potential. Start calling them hooks. If the only reason you stay is because they're not always like this, that means like this is who they mostly are. Don't confuse relief with love. Step 3. Detox your nervous system. This is physiological. You're not just heartbroken. You're chemically dysregulated. Practice grounding techniques, cold showers, digital fasting, therapy with someone who understands trauma bonding. Your healing is not just emotional, it's neurological. Here's the metaphor. You're starving, and they throw you scraps. Just enough to keep you alive. Just enough to keep you coming back. You call it love, but it's malnourishment wrapped in flattery. And the longer you stay in the cycle, the more you forget what real food tastes like. The Stoic path is not about suppressing emotion. It's about mastering the instinct to seek pain dressed up as purpose. Marcus Aurelius said, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." You won't find that calm in a loop designed to keep you dizzy. You're not being kind by staying. You're being broken in slow motion and calling it love. But now you know the cycle. Now you name it. And once you name it, you can break it. Not out of rage, out of mercy for yourself. Number 4. You see the good in them, but you wrote that script yourself. You keep telling yourself they're not all bad, that there's something real there, something good underneath the chaos. You say things like, they didn't mean it, they're just hurting, they have potential, they're not always like this. You've built an entire internal defense case on their behalf, and the most twisted part is, they never asked you to. You did it all on your own. You see, the narcissist doesn't need to fight to stay in your life. You're already doing that for them. Every time you justify their silence, their cruelty, their absence, you're rewriting the script to protect the character you want them to be, not the person they actually are. The only good you see in them is the good you imagined, projected, fantasized, and desperately needed to believe was real. They gave you crumbs. You turned them into a feast. They said something vaguely kind once, 3 months ago, and you've replayed it so many times it now lives in your memory like a core truth. But when you strip away the illusion, all that remains is inconsistency, manipulation, and a frightening vacuum of genuine care. What you're holding on to isn't them. It's a self-authored story that justifies your suffering. Because if they really are good deep down, then all this pain might be worth it. If they have a hidden heart, then maybe your patience is noble. If there's even a 10% chance they'll become the person you saw flashes of in the beginning, then maybe you won't have to face the unbearable truth that this was never love. It was a performance, and worse, you helped write the script. The Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus once said, "We must stop flattering those who wound us with their silence or smile, and call things by their proper name." Narcissists don't love you. They manage you, and they don't give you hope. You manufacture it yourself, because hope is easier to carry than loss. But here's the psychological truth. Your brain is built to resolve dissonance. When someone does something cruel, your mind either accepts they're cruel or bends reality to protect the emotional bond. Most people choose the second, because calling them out means you have to call yourself out too. We're staying, excusing, shrinking. Take Michael, 42, a high school counselor in Nevada. His partner was erratic, cold one week, passionate the next. She praised him in front of friends, belittled him in private. When he confronted her about the inconsistency, she'd tear up, say she was struggling, promise to work on it. That night, she'd cook his favorite meal, touch his hand gently, say she appreciated him. He took those moments as proof of her real self. But months went by, then years. The cycle didn't change. Michael did. He got smaller, quieter, more tolerant of the unacceptable, still believing that if he just kept showing up, the woman from that one good night would become permanent. But she never existed, not in full, only in flashes, enough to bait him, never enough to nourish him. So how do you stop writing fiction and start facing fact? Step 1, make a list of their actions, not their words, not your interpretations, not what you think they meant, just actions. Then read it as if it belonged to a stranger. Would you tell your best friend to stay with that person? If the answer is no, then stop being your own exception. Step 2, examine your own motives. Are you trying to see the good in them? Or are you afraid of what it means if there isn't any? Sometimes we cling to their potential because letting go would mean admitting that we were never truly loved, and that feels like failure. But it's not. It's freedom disguised as grief. Step 3. Name your role in the story. Not to blame yourself, but to wake up. You are the one explaining them to your friends. You are the one defending their mood swings. You are the one saying, "You don't know them like I do." That kind of loyalty to a fantasy is not strength. It's self-sabotage in the name of optimism. Here's the metaphor. You bought a broken radio. It only plays static with the occasional note of music. You convince yourself the music is in there somewhere. You sit by it for months, tuning, waiting, defending its value. Meanwhile, silence becomes your soundtrack. That's what this relationship is. You're listening to noise, calling it melody, and blaming yourself when the song never plays. The Stoics teach us to see the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Marcus Aurelius said, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." And insanity is this: seeing harm, calling it healing; seeing neglect, calling it depth; seeing manipulation, calling it love. You aren't weak for wanting it to be real, but you'll become unbreakable the day you stop protecting the version of them that only exists in your imagination. That version won't save you, and it never was them. It was you, trying to rewrite someone else's story just to survive your own. Number 5. You didn't accidentally fall into a toxic relationship. You stayed because of what remains unnamed. You might think that falling into a toxic relationship was a random accident, a mistake of fate. But the painful truth is, you didn't stumble blindly into it. You stayed because of something deeper, something you never fully named or acknowledged. It wasn't simply about attraction or circumstance. It was a quiet, insidious fear of loneliness, a lack of defined boundaries, and a constant underestimation of your own self-worth. And the narcissist, that master manipulator, is expertly trained to choose those very people, those whose vulnerabilities create a perfect stage for control and domination. Imagine for a moment a person who longs for connection so desperately that the idea of solitude seems unbearable. That fear of being alone, that internal emptiness, becomes the fertile soil in which a toxic relationship can take root. You convince yourself that even a dysfunctional, hurtful relationship is better than facing the echoing void of isolation. Over time, that rationale becomes your chain. Each time you accept hurtful words, each time you rationalize disrespect with "maybe he's just stressed," or "maybe I overreacted," you reinforce a script that whispers, "You are not worthy of better." And then you become ensnared in a cycle where your hope for salvation is misinterpreted as resilience, and every apology you offer for their cruelty is evidence that you deserve more abuse. The reality is brutal. A narcissist is not someone who needs your help or understanding. They are cunning, calculating, and they thrive on the emotional collapse of those who believe in your inherent goodness. They know exactly which vulnerabilities to exploit: your need for validation, your fear of abandonment, your blurred sense of personal boundaries. And they use these as tools to cement their control over you. They choose their victims with a keen eye, honing in on those who are too eager to please, too afraid to stand alone, or too uncertain about their own value. When you remain in such a relationship, you are not a passive victim of chance. You are, in a way, complicit in your own subjugation by clinging to an unfulfilled hope that things will eventually change, that the person you see behind their mask of cruelty might one day emerge. This cycle of hope and disappointment is addictive, like a drug where the highs of intermittent approval mingle dangerously with the lows of constant devaluation. Let's consider the case of Stephanie, a 34-year-old teacher in Atlanta. Stephanie grew up with a strong sense of community, always taught to cherish relationships and seek harmony. When she met someone who initially showered her with attention and affection, she felt as though she had finally found a kindred spirit. However, as months passed, that initial warmth dissolved into a relentless pattern of manipulation. Her partner would offer moments of tenderness that were quickly followed by episodes of cold withdrawal and harsh criticism. Each time he apologized for his hurtful behavior with a vague promise of change, Stephanie clung to those words as if they were life rafts in a stormy sea. Deep down, though, she knew something was off, yet the terror of being alone locked her in place. The more she attempted to justify his erratic behavior, the more it confirmed that her unspoken fears of solitude, of not being enough, were being exploited. Every explanation she gave for his actions, every rationalization for his cruelty, was like adding a new clause to a contract that bound her more tightly to him. Rather than breaking free, she ended up deepening her dependence on his fleeting moments of kindness. Scientific studies in psychology, including those on trauma bonding and intermittent reinforcement, reveal that a cycle of unpredictable rewards and punishments creates a powerful attachment. Neuroscientist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk has documented how the brain releases dopamine during moments of emotional relief, making the brief interludes of affection feel extraordinarily rewarding amidst the constant barrage of neglect. That unpredictable mix, where you are sometimes loved and often hurt, conditions your mind to be perpetually hopeful. Hope that the next good moment is just around the corner. And that hope, though it feels genuine, is nothing more than a sophisticated trap designed by the narcissist to keep you tethered. So, how do you break free from this self-perpetuating cycle of hope that keeps you from recognizing your true worth? The first step is acceptance. Recognize that you are staying not because fate is cruel, but because you are caught in a web of internalized beliefs. Beliefs that tell you you don't deserve better, that isolation is worse than abuse, and that if you just wait long enough, they will change. Once you name those feelings, you can start to dismantle them. Start by journaling your thoughts every day. Write down instances when you felt compelled to explain their behavior, when you found excuses for their actions, or when you justified staying despite the harm. Look at the patterns with cold clarity. Ask yourself, am I staying for them? Or am I staying because I'm afraid of being alone? It might be painful to confront, but self-awareness is the only tool powerful enough to break these cycles. The second step is to recalibrate your boundaries. You don't need to wait for someone to validate your feelings or to cry I'm being abused. Instead, invest in building a life that makes you feel whole, even without their approval. Engage in activities that enrich your spirit, be it through art, fitness, or learning a new skill. Remind yourself daily that you are not defined by how someone else treats you. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus wisely noted, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Begin to master your own inner world by setting clear limits on what you will and will not tolerate. Practice saying no without apologizing and lean into the discomfort of solitude until you find that your own company is enough. The final step is to cultivate an identity independent of their presence. Reclaim your self-worth by reconnecting with friends and family who appreciate you for who you are. Unconditioned, unmanipulated, and free. Therapy or support groups can also provide invaluable tools and perspectives to help you break free from the narrative you've been writing about them. Understand that every time you choose to explain, justify, or hold on to the hope of change, you are writing yourself into a contract that they will always have the upper hand. Instead, choose to rewrite that script. Choose to declare, with quiet conviction, that you are no longer part of a story where your value is measured by their moments of grace. You can decide, in one powerful moment of clarity, that their role in your life is over, because you deserve a narrative where you are the hero, not the supplicant. Conclusion: the crawl ends where clarity begins. You weren't desperate. You were programmed to be. You weren't weak. You were trained, subtly, slowly, to mistake survival for love, to call chaos passion, to wear your self-erasure like a badge of honor. And what did you get in return? A few tender moments thrown like breadcrumbs between long winters of silence, manipulation, guilt, and gaslighting. They never had to drag you. You crawled willingly on a path paved by your own unspoken fears. Fear of being alone, fear of not being chosen, fear that maybe this is the best you'll ever get. But now, you're here. You see it. The illusion, the performance, the game. You're not blind anymore. That was the first victory. The next one? Standing up, quietly, with finality, because nothing terrifies a narcissist more than the moment you stop explaining. Stop waiting, stop hoping, and start walking away. Not with fireworks, not with a farewell speech, just absence so complete it echoes louder than any scream. This video was part one of something bigger. There's more to uncover. Deeper games, darker tactics, and sharper tools you'll need to not just walk away, but never return to that kind of dynamic again. In part 2, we go further. We expose the next layer, the way narcissists mimic empathy, the false transformations they fake when they sense you slipping, and the final move that puts you permanently out of reach. If this message hit you in the chest, if it felt like someone just read out loud the story you've been too afraid to tell, like this video, share it with someone still crawling, and subscribe to Victory Stoic. This isn't a healing circle. This is a tactical briefing. You don't leave narcissistic abuse with crystals and mantras. You leave it with clarity, detachment, and a spine made of steel. And in the comments, mark the moment. Drop your story or stand with us in command. I rise. I don't crawl. Because this isn't the end. This is your exit from the performance, your final bow in their theater. The lights are out, the curtain is closed, and you're already outside, breathing again. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for daring to wake up. Now let's finish this. Part 2 is waiting.